You've announced that you want to cut the welfare. Thank you. You've announced that you want to cut the welfare bill by £12 billion, but isn't this yet another Tory pledge undoing some of the bad work you've done over the course of the last 14 years? Why did the welfare bill get so high under a Tory government?
Well, we've had COVID, of course, amongst other issues, and that has led to an upsurge in sickness and disability, particularly mental health issues amongst younger people, 16 to 24-year-olds, for example. So that's why we're announcing today that in our manifesto we'll have a commitment to over 500,000 additional talking therapies within the NHS. We will be having mental health teams for every single primary, secondary school in the country and FE college, and we'll have mental health hubs, 150 of those across the country for those aged between 11 and 25. And alongside that, Camilla, of course, what we're doing is reforming the gateway into benefits, which we know from what the OBR tells us, for example, with the work capability assessments changes that we're making, that will mean 440,000 fewer people on those long-term benefits going forward.
OK, on D-Day, does the Prime Minister still expect 18-year-olds to do national service when he can't even stay to the end of a service?
Well, clearly the Prime Minister accepts that he made a mistake in not attending the international element of those commemorations. He was there, incidentally, at Portsmouth, and he did attend all the British-led events in Normandy, but he absolutely recognises that he made a mistake to have left when he did. He's issued an unequivocal apology. He uses the words, "I am sorry," and knowing him as I do, I think he will be feeling this very deeply, because he's a deeply patriotic man. And so in terms of supporting veterans, obviously around the cabinet table we have a dedicated cabinet minister, Johnny Mercer, who looks out for veterans affairs. The Prime Minister is completely committed to the really good work that Johnny and others have been doing in better looking after
but he's
our
undermined
veterans,
that
and
good
indeed
work,
coming
hasn't he?
forward with legislation in the next Parliament if we're elected. He's what?
I mean, he's undermined that good work, hasn't he? I mean, Johnny Mercer's not happy about this. Penny Mordaunt certainly wasn't happy about it on the Friday night BBC election debate. She said that the Prime Minister was wholly wrong. I appreciate what you're saying about him issuing an apology. Has he personally apologised to the veterans themselves?
So I don't know exactly who he's apologised to. I know that he has made a very clear, very public apology, actually. And you mentioned Johnny Mercer's response to this. Amongst the other things Johnny has said, I'm pretty certain that Johnny has recognised the extraordinary commitment that the Prime Minister has shown to veterans and to the great work that Johnny has been doing, looking after veterans' mental health, looking after their housing situation, and going even further now and saying in our manifesto we will have a commitment to bringing in legislation in the next Parliament to enshrine those kind of levels of support into law if we become the next government.
I mean, I appreciate the phrase, you know, advisers advise and prime ministers decide, and it was ultimately Rishi Sunak's decision to leave the commemorations early, which, as you say, now regrets. But isn't there a problem with inexperience, incompetence and a degree of arrogance among the Prime Minister's top team? I mean, is it advisable, for instance, Mr Stride, to have your best friend as your chief advisor? That's not objective, impartial advice, is it?
Well, what my observation would be, I don't work very closely at the centre of the campaign, but I do have some dealings with it, is I have always found it extremely professional, very focused. We are the party that is coming out with the bold offering to the British people. For example, in my area, the triple lot plus, which is going to prevent millions of pensioners being dragged into income tax in the years ahead. This is important, Camilla, because the Labour Party is saying they will not support that. So they are prepared under Labour to see millions of pensioners paying income tax and paying more tax if they're already paying tax. And that is what you're going to get under a Labour government. And these are the big issues of this election.
But you've dragged more pensioners into paying income tax because you've frozen the tax thresholds for such a long time.
So you have to look at where you are with the current fiscal arrangements and then ask the questions, do we leave taxes where they are, put them up or take them down? We've taken the decision to take those taxes down for pensioners. Labour have taken the decision to put them up. And of course, what we have done is supported pensioners' incomes really strongly. So since 2010, the state pension has gone up by £3,700. Under Labour, we had the fourth highest level of pensioner poverty in Europe. And that's because they gave us the 75p increase for pensioners. So you know what you're going to get under us, pensioners being out of tax, and you know what you're going to get under Labour, people paying more tax, including pensioners.
A few things have been reported this morning just in reaction to the D-Day debacle. First of all, that the Prime Minister isn't really that interested in international affairs or going to these major events, and that actually David Cameron is the de facto PM on the international stage. I mean, it did look like that in that photo, didn't it?
Oh, no, I can't accept that the Prime Minister is not fully engaged with international affairs. He's been fully engaged, particularly with Ukraine, for example, where the reason why we've been in the vanguard of supporting Ukraine in terms of money and training for their personnel here in the UK and material that they need for progressing the defence of their country. The Prime Minister has been absolutely at the forefront of that.
Yes,
I think nonetheless, I think David Cameron has been a great asset, as a Foreign Secretary who's been out there with a huge level of connections and presence and experience to help us on the various international issues we face.
Well, experience is the key here. I revert back to my previous statement about the team lacking experience and competence and maybe behaving with a degree of arrogance, because not only did they succeed in making Cameron look like the international statesman instead of the Prime Minister, they also allowed Keir Starmer to look like more of a statesman internationally than the Prime Minister. He was the one who met Zelensky. He was at Omaha Beach.
No, you meant, well, OK, so you mentioned international matters and security and so on, and you mentioned Keir Starmer there, Camilla. Keir Starmer is the man who twice fought tooth and nail for Jeremy Corbyn to be the Prime Minister of our country, a man who wants to abolish the army, pull us out of NATO and give up our unilateral nuclear deterrent. So I don't think we should take any suggestion that Keir Starmer is
OK,
in
then
a
Nigel
better place
Farage
than Rishi Sunak when it comes
Nigel
to
Farage
standing up for
looked
Britain
like
on the
more
world
of an
stage.
international statement then. Let's put it like that. Didn't Nigel Farage cover himself a whole lot more glory by self-funding his trip to Normandy, which, by the way, he does every year, than Rishi Sunak? I mean, he's criticised the Prime Minister as not being a patriot. He's right, isn't he?
Yeah, well, no, I really don't accept that, and I've given you reasons why I don't accept that. We have around the Cabinet table our Veterans Minister. The Prime Minister cares very deeply about veterans. He is an absolute patriot. I've known him personally now quite well for a number of years, and he's a patriot to his core. And that's why he will be feeling what has happened so deeply. I know he will. And that is why he didn't hesitate to step forward and apologise. He accepted that he made a mistake. He made a very public apology, a very clear apology. People often ask politicians to do these things and are often disappointed when they don't. Rishi Sunak stood up and apologised, and because he feels very, very strongly about these matters.
OK, Mr Stride, let's just move on to taxation. Obviously, you've made this claim of the Labour Party adding £2,000 to household tax bills. Fraser Nelson of The Spectator has crunched the numbers on the Conservative side, and he's calculated that under Conservative spending plans as it stands, over the course of the next Parliament, were you to win power again, you'd be adding £3,000 to people's tax bills. So isn't it just the case that whoever gets into power, Labour or the Conservatives, the taxpayer will be even more out of pocket?
So the two figures are not comparable. The 3,000 figure is the baked-in fiscal forecasts going forward and the implications they have for the tax burden. The 2,000 figure are additional taxes that Labour would need to find in order to fund the £38.5 billion black hole that there is in their revenue raises and spending commitments that we put forward, and that is something that we've analysed in a very transparent way, and that is the cost to working families up and down the country would be £2,000 across the next Parliament.
But we're in the situation now where the electorate just has to bake in paying higher taxes for what are perceived to be poorer public services.
Certainly under Labour, that's true, because they'll have to
under
fund
the Conservatives as well, surely.
Black hole. Well, no, Camilla. Under the Conservatives, taxes are beginning to come down. Okay, so we've cut national insurance by a third. We've given a tax cut to 29 million hard-working people. That's worth £900 as a tax cut to the average earner, and that's happening right now in people's pay packets. So the trajectory of this government is for taxes to be reduced. Now, we've talked about pensioners. We're going to make sure they're kept out of income tax, whereas Labour are going to tax millions of pensioners. We are not going to do that. So our direction is very clear.